Welcome into Pallilo Points. I'm Brandon Stranger, Sports Map Houston. That's Charlie Pallilo of ESPN 97.5 and 92.5 on the Charlie Pallilo Show, which you can catch weekdays at 10 a.m. here in Houston. Charlie, welcome in. Want to talk some Astros with you. SI released their latest power rankings this week. They have the Astros at number 5. It's still a really good team, but this is the lowest spot on that power ranking that they have had since May. And after seeing the Astros sleepwalk through what should have been a really soft part of their schedule, what's the most concerning part of what you're seeing on field right now?
Where I still think they're pretty safe to make the playoffs. Any of the analytics that run the Monte Carlo simulations, they're still 95% to make the playoffs. And with Oakland floundering around, granted against a tougher schedule, but the A's unable to take advantage of the Astros scuffling versus bad teams, they're probably going to win the division. Concern number one would be if somehow you squander the division and then you're in one game of Russian roulette in a wild card game to advance. And you know what? You can win that game and then go on to win a World Series, or it can be nighty-night in an awful hurry. So that would be my chief concern right now, that you don't mess up, that you don't carry Oakland like an inferior fighter that you don't knock out when you had the chance, and then say, whoa, the A's somehow win 5 of the 6 games head-to-head in the 2 series they play within the last 3 series of the season, and you stumble to that kind of spot. The compounding would be is if you screw that up, well, they're only 2.5 games ahead of the Red Sox, who are in the second wild card spot. There's a good chance it's win the division or you're out of the playoffs, as the A's have tumbled to over the last few days. But provided there is October postseason Astros baseball, I think it's the vulnerability of the starting rotation against better hitting teams that provide more good at-bats up and down the lineup and can stretch out pitch counts and get you into your bullpen earlier in the games, which is the Astros' softest underbelly, subject to fortification from a couple of starters. But if it's an easy call that, you know what, Jake Odorizzi, you're in the bullpen, who's going to be in a rush to go to him in the 5th inning if, say, Urquidy, if back in the rotation, or Luis Garcia, or McCullers is in the 5th inning and he's already thrown 102 pitches. So I think their starting pitching, it's built pretty well and held up pretty well over the full run of the regular season because they have some depth, they've absorbed the injuries, and they have a bunch of guys other than Odorizzi with earned run averages below 4, but they don't have anyone with an earned run average below 3. They don't have anyone who you'd say, you know what, he's a number 1 starter for most of the good teams in baseball. The lineup is a little too feast or famine-y, but it is a really good lineup. And once you're whole again with Bregman and Tucker, if you don't hit in the playoffs, well, you're subject to get beat. But the lineup to me is not a question mark. The rotation and the bullpen bridging to Presley and Graveman certainly are.
Stop me if you have heard this one before, but Dusty Baker's getting some heat from fans. In your opinion, have you seen anything particularly problematic from Dusty's decision-making so far?
I don't think there's anything damning. That a decision here, you pull a string, you push a button, and it doesn't work because the button that he pushed was Brooks Raley or Blake Taylor or Christian Javier or Phil Maton. Well, you know, they're not all world-class buttons, so you make decisions. In the end, it is on the players asked to perform, especially the guys with pedigrees. And when the Astros have their lineup intact, you know, you hardly have any pinch-hitting decisions. One that when the playoffs get here, I want to see Dusty be aggressive since you'll have a real bench. If Aledmus Diaz is on your bench and either Jake Myers or Chas McCormick is on your bench, if you're down 2-1 in the 5th inning, you don't let Maldonado hit. Or maybe in a 2-2 game, if Jason Castro is due up and you have a chance for a big inning, go for it then because you're carrying a third catcher, so Castro or Maldonado is available. You're at fire bullets when you have chances for good shots. That's one specific tactical Dusty Baker element I'll be looking for come the postseason. But in terms of bullpen handling, I don't think anyone can accuse him of wearing out Ryan Presley or not going to him enough. Zach Greinke's been pulled his last 2 starts after having pitched well, just 85 pitches in Kansas City, 92 pitches in a close game in air-conditioned Minute Maid Park. Then when the bullpen gives it up, what are you doing, Dusty? Well, Greinke is 37. Greinke does lead the American League in innings pitched. So they are playing the longer game, not wanting Greinke to be more liable to fade in October. Aggravating if it costs you a game or contributes to costing you a game in August or in September. but not mind-numbingly stupid as a strategy.
Are you puzzled at how Dusty uses some of those guys out of the bullpen? You talked about it. One example in particular being Christian Javier. His appearances seem few and far between. I think he's only pitched 4 times the entire month. Meanwhile, Brooks Raley's garnered the nickname of Daily Raley on Twitter because of Dusty's frequent use of him. He's sporting a 5.50 ERA. It is interesting to see that James Click brought in a lot of arms to fortify the bullpen, and they've been used very outside of Graveman, very, very sporadically.
Well, your recommended Raley allowance should be as infrequent as possible, no question there. But it's not as if Blake Taylor's just money as your number one lefty, but he is the number one lefty, so Dusty's just grab bagging it when he goes to a lefty. Ryan Stanek, who was the number 2 guy until Graveman got here, he's just so inconsistent with his control. And you give up a walk and a homer, and oops, there can go a ball game. Yimi Garcia had pitched pretty well with the Marlins, but never in a game of consequence. So he's been a little inconsistent early as it's settling into, wait, these games are important now, and a high leverage with some actual pressure. And how does he adapt to that? Does he grow into that? I think ideally, Presley's the 9th inning, Graveman's the 8th inning, and then game to game, Garcia, Stanek the 7th inning. You don't want Raley or Taylor doing anything more than getting out one lefty. But now in the age of the rule where if you bring him in mid-inning, he has to either get through the inning, or if it's starting inning, he has to face 3 guys. The lefty-righty matchup thing can be overplayed if you're going with a clearly inferior pitcher. Right? And the Astros have tried to have guys in recent years, get both sides out. Will Harris prominently before Chris Davinsky fell apart here. Right? He was a guy with the changeup of death. You didn't worry about him facing lefties. They just have a whole bunch of question marks without reliably consistent answers other than Presley. And by and large, Graveman's been good since he got there. So Dusty can look bad when it doesn't work out. But the bullpen, once you get past the top 2, it's just a mediocre group of guys.
I want to go back to Javier specifically. You and I have had many conversations about Christian Javier and kind of the use and how they should use him. This seems to be the worst of all of these scenarios in which he's just not seeing the field at all. And this was a guy who they thought really highly of and starter of the future, right? Like that's what was thought of him. And here we are, where he's going 4 and 5 days in between appearances, and maybe he's going 1 or 2 innings deep. Talk about Christian Javier and kind of him being lost in the shuffle here. What do you see? How do you see this playing out for him?
It's as if Dusty Baker, and where Brent Strom factors in, that he's still a starting pitcher, just we're using him in relief. So does he need 3 days off between outings? If he's going 3-4 innings in an outing for a long save, or a starter gets knocked out, he's in the 4th, but it's a competitive game and you use him into the 8th. But if it's a shorter outing, he should not only be throwing every 4 days. Other than Presley and Graveman, and Javier is another one. He can struggle with command and be a little gopher ball prone. But I think he's the 3rd best talent in their bullpen after Presley and Graveman not being used accordingly. They have now inside 6 weeks of an ongoing audition or sorting through roles. I think that it's almost pre-programmed that Stanek is ahead of Javier in the pecking order. So if it's 7th inning, we're going to Stanek. Yimi Garcia hasn't carved out quite that territory for himself. And then for Javier's future, right? If you're not an awesome closer, your value as a reliever is minimal, if not trivial, compared to a good starter who throws 160, 170 innings as opposed to just 50 or 60 out of the pen. So if Greinke is out of here, I hope the idea is that Javier gets stretched out and goes back into the role where it's not like he failed his way out of the rotation. They just had to remove someone from the rotation. But for the 2021 Astros, it's almost like Javier is best suited to come in when a starting pitcher really fails so they can use him for 2-3 innings, but then he gets packed in dry ice for another 3-4 days. So I don't know that there's a simple solution how to best allocate their bullpen resources, but obviously they haven't figured it out yet either.
Did James Click do enough, and will we ultimately remember him doing enough to fortify that questionable bullpen?
I think Graveman was a serious get, and if Toro settles in as a good regular major leaguer for the Mariners, that's okay. Even if Correa leaves, I don't think Bregman moving to shortstop is going to be the long-term solution there that, you gave up a third baseman for a 2-month relief pitcher. If that relief pitcher helps you get deep in the postseason, worthwhile swap there. The straw for Maton trade surprised me, but Jake Myers has by and large been very good. Chas McCormick has been competent, and it's not like Miles Straw was Willie Mays, but he's hitting over 300 and playing a good center field for the Indians. Maton here, to me, he was just a guy. Garcia was closing for the Marlins, but every bad team still has a closer who's going to amass some saves because he gets every save situation. But the Astros did not have the capital to make a run at Scherzer, who was really the only number one starter traded. If you wanted a bona fide, quality major league left-handed reliever, well, the Blue Jays got Brad Hand from the Nationals. Could the Astros have outbid what the Blue Jays put in play there? I don't know. So in the end, you're going to live or die with the results. If their bullpen gives it up in a game or two, I guess the shortest answer to your question is no, James Click will not be judged a master of the 2021 trade deadline.